live. Sorry, I just realized that we're live now. Hey, so I've been talking about this problem and thinking about this problem for a long time, about the human side of enablement, or enablement's role in the human side of the sellers. And Caroline, I was so excited by both the general theme of the latest SES conference. There was a lot of discussion about the role of enablement in that. But your session, which is why I invited you to join, blew my mind away. And I mean that in ways that I can't even articulate. It was an amazing session with so much value. So I wanted to have you here and talk some more about it because I think it's such an amazing topic.
First, can you come with me on any session? I would love to have that be my opening for anything, but thank you so much.
Hey everybody, it's Caroline and she's awesome. That's what I'll do for you every time.
Perfect. If I can just get a meme of that, that would be great.
I'll create you one after this.
Be careful what you wish for on that one, Caroline.
Exactly.
This is a moment where someone might actually honor that request.
I have been known to go too far. Caroline, tell everybody here who you are. Not that you need any introductions, but tell everybody who you are.
Well, thank you, John and Bill. It's so great to be here. I'm Caroline Holt. I am the Executive Vice President of Revenue Enablement at EVERFI, which is a super fancy title, but basically my job is to remove as much friction from the sales process as possible. So my team includes some of the traditional sales readiness and talent, upskilling and development that you'd see in a lot of enablement positions, but I also have responsibility for truly enabling revenue at EVERFI. So I have the sales development rep team that reports up to me. I've got the sales talent readiness pieces. I've got formal RFP response and due diligence, and then the tools and technology, the assets that support the sales team, whether they are on the new logo, growth, or renewal side of our business.
And every time I hear RFP, I get a little bit of bad chills. It feels
well,
terrible.
that's because you don't have my RFP team working with you. And
I'm going to solve that after this too.
That's well, don't take them.
That's awesome. And so nobody cares about me. They shouldn't care about me. This is about you, but I'm John. I'm the collaborator. I work at Bigtincan, and everybody knows Bill Ball. Bill.
Yeah, you want to kick this thing off, you guys?
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay, tough. I think Caroline does though, so I think you're outvoted, John.
I'm starting. Leave me alone. Hey, so Caroline, talk to me about what's the problem. What is the problem we're really talking about today?
It's interesting. I was walking with a friend of mine the other day and I said something about the Great Resignation and she said, the what? And I said, do you not read the newspaper, or, have you been asleep? There's a kind of a big turnover problem in our country right now and in the globe, right? So we've got people leaving the workforce in great rates, whether it's leaving your workforce to go someplace else or leaving the workforce entirely. It's disproportionately affecting women and minorities, people of color. And in sales, that's, those are two communities that we've spent a fair amount of time in the last year or two really, and hopefully a lot longer than that, really trying to cultivate in terms of talent within the organization. So it's a critical challenge and it's costing our businesses a lot of money, and therefore it's costing the enablement world a lot of time and energy to think about how we get the right people in the door and get them effective quickly.
It is scary because we've spent so much time doing a bad job bringing in groups that don't look like me historically. And now that we put so much energy into bringing, different voices and ideas into the workplace, it's really sad to see this impacting them at a higher rate than any other community. It truly is.
It absolutely is. But I would even say beyond that, it's affecting every single person in every revenue organization, right? Whether it's almost like, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but it's almost as though the .com era and 2008 were happening at the exact same time. So you have people who are being drawn away from jobs to do something really fun and sexy someplace else. And then you have, at the same time, most organizations are still recovering from the implications of COVID, where they were not hiring. They might have let people go. They're all of a sudden starting to grow again, and they are struggling, right? So you've got survivors who are frustrated and disengaged. You've got people who are, the recruiting organization is overtaxed. You've got the revenue leadership that are trying to hit their numbers and really struggling. You've got managers or people who've been moved into new positions kind of drowning in all their new responsibilities. There's kind of no shortage of people who are affected either directly or indirectly by this incredible turnover that we're seeing.
Yeah,
right now.
sadly, the pain is spread around pretty far and wide across the organization. So true. Now, well, let me ask you this, because when Bill and I had a little bit of fun recording dueling videos before this, he took the devil's advocate view, and I know he didn't feel this way, but he basically said this isn't an enablement problem. He didn't say that. He said, why is it an enablement problem? So I'm going to throw that to you, Caroline. Why on earth should enablers care?
Well, I think this goes back to what we enable reps to do every day, which is understand what's going on in the organization that we're trying to sell to or renew in terms of their business and how our solution aligns with that. So if you are an enablement person, you should, more than anything else, care about what the business outcomes are that your organization needs, and then how you directly support those to be able to build value and have a seat at the table. You know, if you've ever had a concern about having a seat at the table is wide open because nobody knows what to do right now. And so this is the opportunity to really identify where you can be solutions oriented, where you can help, and where you can have an impact.
And you said it so eloquently and so much better than I ever will, Caroline. But if you want to earn a seat at the table, tackle a problem that is deserving of a seat at the table. And this is a huge business problem that's costing many businesses millions, if not far more than that, of dollars right now, and they don't even know they're getting hit by it. So spot on. Now, one of the things that you focused on during the SES event that I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about was the cost of disengagement. What do you mean by this?
So this is probably less my term. It's more of what we, you know, when we think about somebody who is either a survivor, they're watching lots of people leave and they're kind of frustrated, overwhelmed by their workload, and they're feeling like they're not putting their best foot forward, or they're not making the biggest impact at their organization that they could. Or maybe this has been going on since before people started leaving, right? Somebody who might have been in a job too long, might not be getting challenged in the way that they are having the impact that you would like them to have. They are less productive and there's a cost to your business because of that. So the cost of disengagement is the cost to your business, and it's actually quantifiable. So I can make people uncomfortable around lunchtime and do a little bit of math. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I was looking forward to this slide. So, you know, the next question was, how do you know if it's happening in your business? And this is all amazing. And I said to you, Caroline, before we did this, I started my career as a software engineer. I get excited about math, and I get excited about statistics and numbers. Maybe before we dive into your scary math table,
yeah,
want to give us an overview of what you're talking about here?
Yeah, and I've got some ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADHD as a third grader in Maryland 25, 35, 45 years ago. And so you can imagine just how ADHD I was for that diagnosis. But I am seeing stuff popping up in the chat in terms of what people are seeing in some of their own business. Do you want to dive into any of that, or do you want to keep going here?
Well, let me see. Hey, Bill, any interesting questions popping up, or is it more?
Let's keep going. The question right now, you guys, is the cost of disengagement is what we're talking about, is what Caroline is talking about, what you guys are seeing, and does it align in your company? If yes, why? If no, why? Short answers, please. Already got one. Sasha's saying, yes, it aligns, and we can't solve this with 70s, 80s management styles.
For sure. It is a really expensive problem. We're going to get into some of what we did, because there's some stuff that we can control for at enablement, or at least influence. And there's a lot of stuff that is outside of our control. Just kind of like coaching or anything else, you can only go where you have people who are receptive to making change. But I think part of that receptivity to change is the cost of the problem, right? It's hard for people to argue with math. So if I think about, there are two types of math problems to look at. So if you're having some of these conversations internally, or thinking about whether or not this is as expensive a problem as it actually is, there are two ways to think about it. So one is lost productivity and under engagement, and what that's costing your business. If people are interested in where this comes from, I'm happy to share this afterwards. But if you have an actively disengaged employee, so somebody who's really not showing up and putting their best foot forward, it's roughly costing your business 18% of their salary. So if they make $100,000 a year, we'll do the math based on some round numbers. The cost of turnover. So a disengaged employee is somebody who's staying with you. The cost of turnover is the cost of somebody leaving your organization. And typically that's between 1.5 to 2 times their annual salary. So roughly, if we're talking about somebody making $50,000 a year, it costs $9,000 for your organization in terms of lost productivity if you keep them around. It's going to cost you between $75,000 and $100,000 to replace them. So these are all numbers, not necessarily something that you have control over, but this is the cost of the problem. And if you go to the next slide, we can show you exactly how expensive this may be. So I realize this is an eye chart. So let me unpack what you're seeing here. So we talked about this in my breakout session, and then I wanted to I used 10,000 full-time employees because that was something that was quoted in an article, but I wanted to actually have it look better for your own organization so you could get a sense of this. So if we look across the top, you'll see the variables that we're looking at, which is salary size and employee costs based on that. And then what that proxy would be if you have roughly 500 employees in your entire organization, 2,500, 5,000, and 10,000. This just gives you a sense of what you could look at. So from a disengagement perspective, if it's costing you 18% of a person's salary, and roughly 30% of your company right now is disengaged at an average of $75,000 a pop. If you're a 500 employee company, you've got about 150 disengaged employees today, and that's costing you roughly $2 million a year. If you've got 2,500, that's probably about 750 that are disengaged, and that's costing you about 10 million a year, 20 million, 40 million as we go to 2,500, 5,000 to 10,000 FTEs. If you look at that next horizontal line with turnover, if the average cost of turnover is 1.5 to 2 times someone's salary, if you're assuming a 30% turnover rate, which just before this session I Googled, and right now roughly 55% of people are looking for new jobs. So spoiler alert.
And I think numbers even higher.
Gonna get worse, right? Yeah. So if you were to do that, you want to understand the total number of full-time employees at your organization, your turnover rate, and then your average, if you were to look at 1.5 to 2 times their salary, what that range is. So if you have 500 employees and you have 150 of your employees leave, that's costing you $16 to $22 million. I just gonna want to repeat that because I'm only talking about a 500 FTE organization, $16 to $22 million. So when you say like, hey, I'd love a seat at the table, this isn't an executive issue. This is not a C-suite issue. Nobody has the answer. So to Sasha out there, kudos to you for stepping up and saying nobody knows the answer to this. The truth is nobody knows the answer to this, but they also probably don't know the cost of the problem. This is not just the recruiting cost, right? This is the lost productivity. This is the impact on not hitting a revenue goal. This is promoting people early. This is all the stuff that rolls into that. It's costing between 16 to $22 million if you have 500 employees. If you've got 5,000 employees, it's about 169 million to 225 million that's costing your business.
And it's not too hard to figure out for your business. If you take a look at each of those elements that you just noted, Caroline, exactly what your business cost is. You know how long it takes your sellers to get up to productivity. So you know what that lost productivity is if you lost someone who actually was productive. You know what the cost is to recruiting. You know all of those numbers. You can do a back of the envelope kind of math and be able to easily sit down with your leaders and say, here's what this problem could be costing us. So these are great numbers. These are amazing numbers based upon research data that we'll share after this, that we'll share together after this. But it's not hard to figure out what it is actually for your business, which I think is the most important thing. Any one of us can walk away from this meeting, go calculate that cost and say, we got a problem. What were you going to say, Bill? I saw you jump in.
Sure. So, I mean, this isn't a new problem as of this month. It's a big new problem as of this year.
Yeah.
But like what's something like this helps a practitioner with me, like me, is like, some of us, all of us know about the problem, or most of us know about the problem. Like, I'm not going to put in the chat, you guys, hey, are you seeing the Great Resignation in your organization? Because if you're not, like, maybe you're hiring all my people and I need to come help you down. But on the flip side, like, I've been consulted about in my organization. You know, the problem gets really big, really fast. Like HR's got cheese, like everybody's got cheese in this. So when I was saying, hey, is this in the scope of enablement? The cost of the employee is a problem that everyone can recognize, and a language that everybody can speak. So that's what really hit me here, was like, okay, not only is my CEO going to understand this, but like the people are going to start being able to rally around this a little bit better versus like point, you know, like corporate recruiting might say, well, I think it's that the sales managers aren't doing enough coaching, you know, and the sales managers are going to say, our corporate recruiting needs to get with it. They're not finding us good people, and we've got to just pick the best of the worst. So you're going to get all of this, you know, and that was my cognitive dissonance for, is this in the scope of enablement? But when you get to the cost, to me anyway, that seems like something that everybody can get behind.
Well, yeah, think about it. Everybody struggles to hit their forecast every single quarter, every single year. Right here, you can show a forecast killer that I'll tell you your CRO or equivalent is going to really pay attention to. And when you get their attention, you can start to solve this problem. But anyway, I would encourage people to go back, look at that data for their own businesses, and we'll also share the source of those numbers as well. Now, Caroline, what's interesting is you and I chatted about this a little bit, and I saw this as two ways you could solve this problem. You could focus on current employees, solve the disengagement problem, or you could start to work with new employees coming in. So maybe let's spend 2 minutes talking about these 3 points from Gallup for existing employees. And what are your thoughts on these?
Yeah. So this is from Gallup, and basically the 3 things that they see as driving disengagement or under engagement are limited perceived opportunities for development, so career advancement and development within or into next roles, disconnection from company purpose, and weak relationships at work. I think this is great general information. This is all potentially within our control too, right? We can provide resources to our internal employees to understand more about what the pathing is internally. We can, you know, your brand organization can step it back up around what it is that your organization does and how powerful it is and what their role is in that. And obviously weak relationships at work, a lot of that we're seeing post-COVID, right? But there's only so much that's happening here. And the reality is what I'm seeing, at least in my own business, and what McKinsey is seeing as well. I shared some of the McKinsey data at the SES conference, but most organizations are focusing on the transactional side of keeping people. So it's like, we're going to throw a signing bonus or a stay bonus, and not a signing bonus, a stay bonus at you. We're going to, you know, we're going to have this recognition program that's like a one and done event. That's really not what these are saying, right? So this is really more about some of the systemic issues. So I would say, this is helpful in terms of guidance. You have the best information. If you've ever done an engagement survey or a workplace training survey or anything over the last few years, your employees have probably told you everything you need to know already. This should not be reinventing the wheel. This should not be like, hey, let's figure out what the spiff is for this month or quarter. You just have to go back to that data and say, oh, wow, for 3 years, we've heard that we haven't invested enough in our career paths. Now we're paying the price, right? So are there ways that you can quickly resolve for that? I suspect that everything that you're going to see in terms of what a lot of what we did at EVERFI or have been working on tracks with it tracks directly with a lot of what we had been hearing from our employee engagement surveys.
Yeah, spot on. And the other thing that I'll share is research tends to show about a third of sellers will leave every year. It's roughly 33%. Yep. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think the increase due to the Great Resignation was about 4%. Additional turnover in the high tech space, greatest in that middle range, roughly 35 to 50-year-old employee. My point with all of that is you need to focus here, but understand that the incremental increase to your business impact because of COVID, it's only about 4% at the highest. It's a problem. It's a real problem, but it's probably a bigger problem on the flip side when it comes to recruiting, onboarding, and all of that. So if it's okay with you, Caroline, what I wanted to do was talk about the opportunity side, because this is where I know you spent rock star amount of time to get amazing results. And maybe while I know Joanna's going to throw up a poll or a survey in 2 seconds, maybe while that happens, can we start talking about the measurement side of things?
Yeah. So I will say, I don't know that we've seen amazing results yet. We have been, and we've stemmed the tide a bit. I think a lot of the results that we're seeing are hopefully going to bear fruit in the future around engagement relative to role, around time to productivity, additional revenue that we've been able to capture in shorter amounts of time. So we are absolutely seeing very positive green lights. I think we're going to need 6 to 12 months to see how all of this goes to have more than that. But I think the measurement piece, that I want to hopefully spend the least amount of time here, because the measurement piece is really about we haven't had this before. We are potentially going to look, every single one of us on this call is potentially looking at 100% turnover this year, right? That is a real possibility. It could be as low as 30%. I would say that if it's as low as 30%, you're either doing something really right or you've stagnated a really long time ago and people are just comfortable with status quo. But I would, but I think more of us are going to fall in the well north of 35%, potentially well north of 55%, maybe even closing in on 80%, right? And so maybe we're just all playing a game of like, I feel like it's like at the beach where you're on like the teacups and you're going around on the thing and you're going in and out. Maybe we're just going to all be shifting talent to other organizations, but there's a huge opportunity in that. So I love to see life through opportunities. And so that's really what I've chosen to focus on, is less about like the forward-looking metrics and more in this session on what were the 5 steps that we took to make the most out of this critical time.
Perfect. And honestly, so I tried to rush through to this slide because this is where I think the meat of the conversation is. And for everybody listening in, what Caroline and I will do now is based upon how you voted in terms of what you want to learn more about and dig into. Let's go an area at a time, Caroline, until we almost run out of time.
Okay.
Because I have a feeling there's 1,000,000,001 questions that are going to arise from everybody here. And it looks like, just looking at the survey, that onboarding for effectiveness is the one that's slightly inching out everything else for the top item. Why don't we start talking about there? Because, and I want to pick this a little bit before I hand it to you. A lot of times we talk about onboarding fast. We don't talk about onboarding for effectiveness. So it's a subtle difference in your choice of words that I think is a powerful difference and a really important one. But I'll throw the ball to you now.
Yeah, well, let me just make sure that everybody knows what's on here, just so that you have the highlights. And I'm happy to talk about all of these. I am a sales nerd party of one, happy to join anyone for a virtual chat. But this for me, and the nod is to Nancy Nardin, I think, on her Maslow's hierarchy version for sales. So I think that if we were to think about the fundamental need that you have to solve for, it's engaging and developing your current talent, right? We want to stem the tide there wherever possible through informal feedback, role clarity, making sure that people understand that your job is to come on board, be successful in your onboarding, perform in your role, perform consistently in your role, and then grow into the next role, right? That is that first Gallup disengager around not understanding advancement. People who come in thinking that in 3 months they're going to get promoted, people who come in thinking that they were doing one job that was sold to them during the recruiting process, and a year or two later, that's not the job that they have. That's all stuff immediately within our control that we need to be working with our talent organization on, as well as our revenue managers. The second for me is around the clarification of the job roles and responsibilities. So really understanding, I think the first big opportunity here is, what is your go-to-market strategy today, right? So we've had a lot that's shifted in organizations, businesses, on how they go to market, whether they've pivoted products, whether they've pivoted the way that they engage through a virtual environment. That requires a full scale, at least refresh on your job descriptions and the activities that those different folks are doing. Or in our case, it also required that we actually built out new roles that didn't exist before, because they had a skill set that our team was not prepared for or did not want to do, right? In some cases, there were parts of their job that they were not effective at, and we saw that they were not effective at it over time. We stripped those out of some of their roles to create roles that actually honored that skill set and found different people to do that work. It also required benchmarking for comp and title. Sorry, John.
No, I was going to ask you, Caroline, because that's really interesting. Can you go just a little deeper in terms of how did you figure out with your leadership team the changes in the go-to-market motion and then rationalize that down to the job roles? Was it just a series of conversations? Were you already sort of sitting at that table so you could be part of it, or how did that look like?
I definitely was already involved in some of the conversations. So I meet monthly with our former, we don't have a CRO right now, but our former head of revenue, our head of RevOps, and both our HR business partner, as well as our head of talent. And what we were looking at was how they were performing in terms of lagging metrics, right? But then digging into that, right? So an account manager, for example, has an upsell quota, which is specific to their ability to grow their existing business, as well as a renewal quota. We had some that were knocking both metrics out of the park. We had some that were knocking one metric out of the park and not the other. We had people who were hired for a job where they had no growth responsibility. It was exclusively renewal. They've continued to be incredibly successful at that. They are incredibly, they are revered by their customers. They have just never had an interest or been even with a ton of training, coaching, and development, whether it's skill or will, they're not getting there on the upsell side. And then we have other folks who have been incredibly strong from a commercial mindset, who are missing deliverables on what that customer needs to set up that renewal lifecycle or to get what they want out of it. We realized that those are multiple jobs, right? So as we diagnosed what was actually happening behind the scenes, it started to set itself up well for like, maybe our problem is not that they're not hitting their number, it's that they're in the wrong role. And then it was more, are they in the wrong role, or is it that the role is scoped in a way that they can't be successful because of their skill set or otherwise? So then as people left, we were able to say, you know what, this role actually needs to be divided up, or for this segment of the market, it makes sense based on how we engage with the market that we have a different role that speaks to some of these needs for this customer base.
So for you, and I love that, because you're saying, I think I hear you saying, Caroline, that as you hired, you had defined these new roles and you filled for them. Did you do any amount of, did you attempt with the existing staff to break up their roles, or was there too much resistance and pain in trying to go that route too?
Yeah, we're actually doing that now for 2022. So as folks were leaving, we saw this need and opportunity. And then with our existing team, we are starting to do this going into 2022 with more clearly defined roles. So we were able to take a position that somebody had and say, okay, so what we actually need out of this job now is this. So we're rescoping the role for what we're hiring for. And then as we look at our 2022 strategy, we need to figure out how we divide these up going into 2022.
Now, you are a real rock star, and I'm sure your entire team is, but let me ask you this. Nothing ever goes 100% right. Were any tips for people out there if they consider going this route on, geez, I kind of went off course when we thought about this, keep this in mind? And if there's not, that's okay too, Caroline.
Yeah, so I think the things I would say are be comfortable failing fast, right? You can figure some of this stuff out, but this is a little bit of a playbook. This is the playbook based on what I did at EVERFI, but it's a playbook that you can utilize as well, kind of as a checklist of, and in fact, I have some resources that I shared at the SES conference on, if you're interested in focusing on any one of these areas, how do you become the internal consultant on this? What are the questions that you ask of yourself, of your partners, of your team, to make sure that you're focused on the right behaviors? But I think, be comfortable not getting it right. You can't be the person who says, we're going to wait to figure out, make sure it's 100%. We're not in a position right now where we have a lot of time to play with on here.
I love that. And that's such spot on advice. Hey, Bill, what were you going to say, my friend?
I just see some stuff in the chat. I think that I'm glad we got to this, because I'm interested in onboard for effectiveness. I'm interested in engage and develop. I'm interested in all these categories, but they all stem back to something that you guys have been talking about. And Julia and Sasha have chimed in on the chat about this. It's resetting your sales roles based on customer needs, right? So
Bingo.
Like if you don't start there, some of this other stuff may not line up the same way. Am I correct in my thinking about that, Caroline?
Exactly. That's in that defined go-to-market, right? So once you're doing what you can to have your internal folks engaged and developed based on what you have today, how do you think about what your customer needs? Your customer has to be at the center of all of this, right? And so if it doesn't matter whether you like the person that you're working with or who reports to you, or that they 100% love their role, we can't solve for people. We have to solve for customers.
Amen. This is a little bit of a loaded question, because I think some people do this better than others. was part of this exercise going back through the buying journey, the sales flow and all of that as well? Did you guys go deep? Or I can imagine, to your earlier point, fail fast. You did it at a quick level, you got it 80%, and then you iterated probably.
Yeah, I mean, so I wish I could tell you that I had gone through this like rigorous process as this process. This is really, in hindsight, a lot of the stuff that was happening behind the scenes to get us to where we are now. So this is my playbook for you all in terms of how to think about this. So once you clarify the job descriptions, then you decide what is critical with somebody coming in the door versus something that's coachable, that you're willing to say, we can get this person to do this over time. How do you make sure that your hiring process is inclusive and done rapidly? So rethinking that piece. How do you make sure you're onboarding for effectiveness and measuring? These are basically the 6 steps or 6 kind of, the different parts of the pyramid. But I would not say that this was a process that I went through. It was more a look in the rearview mirror. Okay, this is what we did. This is where we could have done better. This is, if I were going to suggest somebody to do this, here's what they should have thought of at this point, sort of thing.
I think you should turn this into a book, Caroline, because it's really good.
Do you have somebody to write it for me? Because I don't really have time for that, but I'd be more than happy to continue to geek out on it.
We could partner on it at some point.
Okay.
I'm going to jump around because you've kind of started touching upon this. And while it was the 3rd most voted item, critical versus coachable skills, I want to jump there for a second because it really ties into how you hire, onboard, and train so closely.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, how do you figure this out? Because we all talk about competencies and only a few of us get it right. And I'm not one of them that get it right very often. So
pop a +1 in the chat if you have ever gotten hey, we have this problem, and so we probably need training for that. Our chat should be blowing up, right?
Yeah. There's more +1s than you can imagine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that is the same issue with a lot of these job descriptions too. Like, we want an enablement professional who is going to, from the ground up, with 0 resources, be able to create an amazing program. They're going to be there. Maybe they have a seat at the table, or actually maybe we never give them access to anybody who needs to direct. They're just ordered. But they're also going to be, they're going to be able to build training. They're also going to be able to execute training. They're going to make sure that every new hire is set up for success. They're going to make sure that the manager has no responsibility in this, because we need people who are ready to go, right? That's a lot of the enablement professionals world. Similarly, it's a lot of the sales rep world, whether that's on new logo, renewal, or upsell, right? And so it's what we needed to do in the job description process, which is why it's the first thing after engage and develop, is you have to know who you're hiring for and determine which of those skills we can coach for on the job and which we can't. So that is entirely dependent on what the customer or the prospect needs to hear and see, as well as what the manager is capable of. If you've got a brand new manager, even if we know exactly what that new person needs to do and be successful, that person is not going to be set up well for success if we bring in somebody who may be cheaper to hire, or maybe they're available this week, but they're going to require 3 to 4 months of coaching from a new manager who's never done this before and is behind, or on their goal. You might find in a better labor market that you can require more things to be coachable, or maybe you have more ramp. So that critical versus coachable is an iterative process based on who you're hiring for, whether that role is brand new, right? If that's a brand new role, you're going to need somebody coming in to say, okay, I've done this before someplace else, versus I'm going to try and figure it out. And we've got a year and a half to figure out what this looks and feels like. So that is really dependent on your organization, but taking a lot of the competencies that I've shared on the next slide as well, and thinking about what are those competencies that are coachable and versus critical. You have to define that before the recruiting process starts, because each one of, I would say there are probably 5 or 6 skills or competencies that you need to be testing for in your recruiting process. Each person who plays a role in the hiring process needs to own one of those critical skills that they're testing for, and then they're either advocating for or against this person's ability to do that based on their interview.
If I'm not going to drive you crazy, and I see a Bill came in, so 1 second, I'm going to jump to that next slide and jump back, because I think it's so timely.
Yeah.
Same page. You know when there's those flag words when you're listening to a speaker and you're getting inspired and you're learning, and then they say something and then your brain gets stuck there.
Exactly.
And you missed the last paragraph. I'm stuck on what can we coach for on the job and what can we not. So without giving away the secret sauce too much, I hope you guys have something to say about that. And I want to hear what other people see in their respective organizations in relation to this in the chat.
So Bill, do you want me to walk through this right now and then we can go to the chat and get some, okay. So this is kind of a compilation of roles, job descriptions, behaviors, competencies. Taylor, if you're on here, this is a nod to you. We talked a little bit about this in the SES breakout, but basically, so I mentioned earlier that we had this account manager role that we've now essentially broken into 4 positions. This all used to be loaded into an account manager's job description or their bag of tricks, right? They were kind of the enablement. And I see people post on this all the time, like your CSM shouldn't be the answer to everything. Your AM shouldn't be the answer to everything. So I've just taken, when I think about competencies, the performance metrics for any revenue job those are the lagging indicators of what's actually happening around their ability, their back office process management, how they engage, whether it's with a prospect or customer, their communications and collaboration skills, their growth mindset and approach. So when I'm looking for stuff that's critical versus coachable, I need to understand for each role that we're hiring for, what do we need that person to be able to do when they come in and have had experience with, and then what are the things that we can develop over time? So there may be 25, 35 skills, behaviors that they need to be able to demonstrate to be proficient by month 3 or month 5 or whatever. But which are the ones that they have to do when they come on board because either the role requires it or because the manager that they're reporting to will require it in order to make that person be successful. So when I think about this in terms of that account manager role, I've just highlighted one competency or one area for each of these that's changed. So what used to all be in one account management job description where we were looking at how many initial sales meetings, that we call them ISMs, discovery calls essentially, they're doing each month, what their NPS score is, how many of them are going live by 45 days and getting value, how many deliverables are executed on time, how many QBRs did they do, what's their gross renewal rate, what's their multi-year subscription rate, what's their net retention rate. So gross renewal rate is like the percentage of their deals that are at bat that are renewing. Net retention is how of those people that renew or continue to buy from us, can we get more out of them in terms of total contract value, right? So for the account management associate now, they are looking at scheduling new discovery calls so that we're generating pipeline to drive that upsell number. The implementation specialist is more responsible for consulting with the client on their rollout and training process so that we've got them set up more effectively for success. The client service lead is scheduling those quarterly business reviews or leading discussion around the impact data that we have. Maybe they're using that to surface some opportunity, but then they don't have to run with that opportunity and figure out how to drive that to close. And then the account manager really has more of the commercial role around identifying the growth-based opportunity, making sure that they understand exactly what's going on in that organization's business, and then suggesting the way that they grow or renew that deal with us so that they're continuing to get the most out of their current relationship and grow it over time.
Boom. I hope everybody's brain is going like this. And Bill, I see some great questions coming in, and I know I was going to throw to you for a second to raise them.
Yeah, I'm thinking personally about how I slice and dice some of this at my org, and I haven't gone this granular. Laura has a couple of questions, and you've touched on this a little bit, Caroline, but I think this may give you a little bit of a chance to double down. Her first question is, do you have any good practices on how you assess these competencies? That would be the first question. Like, how do you suggest a sales enablement professional works with their organization to assess all this stuff and map this out?
So can I ask a clarifying question, Laura? You can pop it in the chat. Is that how do you personally assess it, or how do you give the tools for managers to be able to assess and then send them either your way or request support on how to close some of those gaps, or is it both of those?
I would suspect it's the latter, but just to how we do it company-wide, but we'll see if Laura has a follow-up there. While we're waiting for her to respond on that, the other question she had that I thought was interesting is, you know, do you have a ballpark ratio that you use between soft skills and job specific skills, you know, and then even like company specific product knowledge?
In the hiring process or their ongoing effectiveness? If I'm talking about the hiring process, no, I wouldn't say that I have. I think, again, it tends to be very role specific. So with the commercial skill set in our world, that has become a critical piece that they have to have run a very similar sale before they come into our organization. We can't teach that on the job. What we can teach on the job is more of the product knowledge, right? So you don't have to be an industry specialist. We used to hire a lot of industry specialists. I can coach and teach on that a lot more effectively and easily and at scale than I can teach somebody how to run a full cycle sale from you know, prospecting all the way through to a close. But that's my org, right? And that's what we've figured out is critical for my business. So I think I hate to say that it's more job specific, but I would say that it's more job and potentially even organization specific.
And I like Laura's statement in the chat too. She's like, the challenge she sees is that people are afraid if it'll be used to evaluate performance. So how open and honest they will be. So I'm curious, Caroline, about how did you guys actually evaluate it? Was it the managers doing an assessment every quarter, every year as part of an annual review? Was it an employee self-assessment, a mix of the two, or something completely different?
Yeah, so I originally came to EVERFI. By the way, I never thought I would go back in-house after 2016. I thought I was going to be a career consultant. EVERFI just kept making my opportunity more and more exciting, and I went in-house. So I actually built for them a competency assessment tool by role. So I refined a lot of that last year as part of this project, or kind of earlier this year as well. But I would say that, so that's designed that has what good looks and feels like. So for each role, although those were the pre-2021 roles, right? So we haven't fully refined what all these different competencies are now that we have so many different roles. We have for some, and it's been as we've had new hires that we've needed. But there's a tool that I have that basically defines what each of these competencies is and what good looks like, has coaching suggestions for the manager for what it is that if they have a gap there, how they could be closing that gap. But it's really a self-assessment. So the rep does a self-assessment of this, the manager does a self-assessment or a downward assessment, and then they have the conversation. Given that most of these are not skills that you can develop in a week or two, most skills take a couple of months to become really effective at and closing the gap, then I usually recommend that they spend about 2 to 3 months working on 2 to 3 skills.
I'm curious, Caroline, based upon how they're used, do these get used as part of their yearly reviews and any other sort of compensation related impact? And do you see challenges in getting honest self-assessments as a result?
So the answer is they are not used for that purpose. They are truly, how do you develop them? And actually, I kind of had an internal fight with somebody over this. I don't see them, they shouldn't be tied to compensation, right? This is somebody, whether you are in your first year as a sales professional in our account executive role, or you've been doing it for 5 or 6 years, there are still opportunities for you to be more effective in different areas. And so what does high performance look like? And then how do we coach for that? So it's not tied to compensation. We do use it sometimes during the performance, like the PIP process, to say, these are some of the things that we're expecting that we're not seeing. Or these are some of the activities that we could help coach you on, but we don't tie it. We don't have it part of their performance review. We do provide it as a resource to managers and to reps during the formal performance review process to say, as you're building out, as you're thinking about your effectiveness in this role, these are some of the things that you may think about, or these are some of the things that you may want to have in your individual development plan.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And Deb Heffernan throughout, how do you leverage the data you're pulling to build your enablement for your overall teams? And I think she's asking the same thing I was thinking about. How does all this individualized atomic data boil up and bubble up to give you more visibility? And does it?
So if anybody works for a founder, you may also appreciate this. Our founders often are more focused on vision than data. So, some depends on the founders that you support. But I think that I would say that my biggest vulnerability is that I don't have better metrics and measurements. I don't pull enough of the data. I'm not using the data as much to drive the next pieces, partially because of how much turnover we're seeing. The data is not as relevant. So I think I would say come back to me in another year and ask me that question again.
I love that too. And the fact is, this is being used to pull very personalized levers at a very atomic level. So bubbling it up to the next level will be critical, but even getting it at this level has to be transformational. And I know it is. Last one, Caroline, I'm going to ask you maybe the last topic before we get to the end of the slides is one of the next topic area was determine critical from coachable skills. And we talked about that. Engage and develop. So engage and develop was a topic. If you want to dive into that, that would be awesome too.
Do you want me to dive into that? Or I know that a lot of people were interested in the onboarding effectiveness piece, and I don't have this slide in the deck that you and I put together before today. But if anybody would like, I'm happy. I don't know if I can share my screen, Joanna, but if I can show what our 7-week AE onboarding program looks like, which is all around time to effectiveness. Do you want me to share that?
I'm going to stop sharing my screen, share yours, Caroline. That's awesome.
Okay. All right, let me see if my technical savviness or lack thereof.
We see it.
Okay, so let me present it so you can actually see it. Okay, so this is our new hire onboarding program. I've just rebuilt a lot of this. By the way, so this is an exciting day for me. So this time last year, I got some outreach that this program won Sales Enablement Program of the Year from BrainShark, which was huge. Kudos and exciting news. Today, I got a outreach that I'm the Enablement Leader of the Year, which I'm not supposed to reveal publicly, but I'm on the Sales Enablement Society webinar. I feel like there's no better group than that to share that exciting news with. So, but this is an overview of the new hire onboarding program. So what I wanted to structure this around was, this is not fully time to productivity or time to effectiveness, but when I arrived at EVERFI, our program was a 1-week to 2-week kind of list of things to watch, people to have meet and greets with, having been the person often that people were assigned to go meet and learn from, that people would show up and they would say, okay, well, so I understand that you are doing this. Can you tell me about your job? I'd spend a half an hour with them. I had no real understanding or context for what they were doing. They didn't really have context for what I was doing or how I could help them. And so what I built out instead was, what are the skills and behaviors that we need to have them exemplify and demonstrate by roughly 8 weeks and then 12 weeks and then 6 months into the role? And then how does our onboarding program support that? So what you're seeing here are roughly, each one of these blue blocks is about 6 to 8 hours of classroom-based workshop training. You're not seeing a lot of the stuff that they're doing outside the classroom in terms of practice work, in terms of submitting certifications. We have milestones and certifications. Milestones are like red, yellow, green. Did you do the activity? Are you on the right track? And then they have 4 certifications where they're actual role plays. So week 1, they get a little bit of talent orientation. They get, they're basically 4 key parts to that week. One is a full day session on kind of welcome to EVERFI, how we deliver value to our key stakeholders, which includes employees, investors, customers, and one another. And then, so they learn about SaaS, they learn about, why are, understanding what your comp plan is half of the conversation. Understanding why your comp plan is designed the way it is requires that you understand how a SaaS business operates. So I load that into day 2. Day 3 is our sales process, our methodology. By the end of that day, they submit an elevator pitch. They learn how to use a lot of the sales tools at a very high level, what can support them across their sales process. And then our sales stages, how those align with the buyer's journey. Then they get deep on product training across the last 2 days of their week. They review, we sell social impact education delivered at scale. So we're an e-learning business essentially that specializes in social impact education. And so we have across those 2 days, they're watching or engaging with a bunch of our courses. By the end of that first week, they submit a 15 to 30 minute interview, basically going through 20 critical questions around pain points, personas, who we target, what our solutions do, why they do them in that way. They submit them through Brainshark, we give them feedback, that sort of thing. Week 2 is all around prioritization and scheduling initial sales meetings or discovery calls. So they basically learn the same skills that an SDR does. They learn how to get, they have to have their territory or at least a portion of it by Monday of their first week. They go through having learned all the pain points and personas piece. They learn how to prioritize. They learn what tools that they have to help support their research process. They learn how to prospect and schedule for the different solutions they have. They learn the tools that support them in that journey. And then by the end of that week, they schedule with a sales leader. They basically treat us as a prospect. They dial, their numbers pop up more than spam in my call. Then at some point when they're not expecting it, I answer and, or one of my colleagues does, and certify them. Week 3 is all around executing discovery. So it doesn't help to understand what's happening in a discovery call if you don't have any yet. So they go through learning how to execute a discovery call, then they certify on that. Weeks 4 and 5, they learn how to execute a demo. And so then they certify on that. Week 6, they learn how to navigate the decision process, how to build and run a pricing call, how to build and run a proposal call, how to negotiate what we care about in our trade-offs. They certify on that. And then week 7 is like final, once they close a deal, what happens then? That post-signature handoff process, how is it working with account management? How is it working with implementation? They do a competitor and objection handling deep dive certification. And then boom, they're hopefully off to the races. Are they 100% effective? Absolutely not. It's still a 3 to 4 month ramp, but they have built pipeline. They are productive from the first day that they get into seat, and they're effective at least in running a full sales process by the end of week 7.
Love that. Love that so much, Caroline. Now, a question for you, there's a bunch of different questions from the audience, so I'll just take those. What point do they start actually getting on the phones, and when does quota actually start to kick in for them?
Yeah, so they get on the phones as soon as they're certified. So every time they certify on something, we're saying that you have our blessing to be out there doing that. So by the end of week 2, if they've been certified on scheduling that call with a customer, then they are scheduling and creating pipeline in their own territory that they're going to execute. By the end of week 3, they are executing discovery calls if they're certified. So then it's all about, giving them an incentive to do this fast and quickly so that they can build the pipeline. So we've got a fast start plan to help support that.
If they don't pass the certification, what happens?
Well, it's a pain in the ass for me because then they're behind. But it's, well, a couple things happen. One is they get continued coaching, but we want to try and keep them on pace as much as possible. And then 2, if we're seeing that they aren't able to pass a number of these, this starts to become a question about whether this was the right hire.
Perfect. That makes sense.
But then you have the documentation to share with HR to show a pattern of not being able to hit milestones, as opposed to having somebody kind of hanging out for 6 or 7 months and never being productive. To the quota question, they have a ramped quota for their first quarter. They're usually at a full quota by their second quarter. Depends on the vertical and size of the deal, the deal size that they sell on average. But they're typically full quota by the end of by second quarter. I did get a question about the people on my sales training team. Oh, such a painful question. So there should be 3. I have currently posting. In fact, if anybody is interested, I just posted a sales readiness lead for our account management community. I have somebody who has responsibility for the account executive community. And then I have a woman who works with me who's a project manager. She does a lot of the back office work to make sure these programs are successful, who just came back from maternity leave last week. Thank goodness.
Nice. And if anybody wants to work for an enablement leader of the year, this is your chance. Now I'm going to give us 1 more minute to answer a couple of questions before we dive back because we're running out of time. But did you start off, did the folks start off in cohorts? Are the hiring managers involved, and what tech do you use?
Woo, so many good questions. Okay, so hiring managers, I am a force multiplier. I am not an onboarding jockey. My job is not to make your people that you have hired successful. My job is to kind of like, the talented and gifted leader in classrooms or special education support in classrooms across the country. Their job is not to take kids out and give them specialized attention. Their job is to give managers the tools and resources to be successful. So that is the only way you can scale. So managers have, we actually just finished working on a whole groove flow that's going to new managers and new hires every week. So one is the manager gets a preview of what they're working on. They have classroom training with me. They have a specific number of hours each week with directions of what that manager should be doing with them to reinforce what they're doing in the classroom with one of us. Then they go through the certification process. The milestones are typically managed by my team. The certifications are usually the manager has responsibility for running the certification, and then either me or somebody from my team is there to cross calibrate and make sure we're holding people to the same standards. What
Caroline,
tools do I use?
Yeah,
Brainshark is my readiness tool. I've got a great tech stack. So if you're talking about the whole tech stack, I'm happy to share that outside of this, but Brainshark is my readiness tool that we rely heavily on.
We could go for hours with the amount of questions in here.
I'm telling you, sales nerd party one, bring it.
I love it. You know, but we don't have time. So let's try to ramp it down to, you know, what are your key takeaways?
My key takeaways for today, I would say there's not a ton you can do about the people who are leaving your organization. And in fact, some of that is healthy turnover. If you think about where you can be incredibly beneficial and have a seat at the table to really build your reputation internally and help solve this problem, it's around making sure that you've got the right, you know, to the extent that you have advancement opportunities, that you are showcasing those internally, that you are working collaboratively with your HR and revenue leadership team around whether the roles are the right roles, scoped the right ways, whether we're testing for the right things in the hiring process, and then whether the onboarding program is a collaborative means of getting somebody to be effective in their role, not just the check the box that they went through some training.
All I can say is, oh my God, Caroline. I was excited after the SES conference. I feel more energized than ever right now. Bill, I know we have 3 minutes left. Is there a question or two you want to call on just to try to close it out, or do you want to end with your final thoughts as you tend to do, my friend?
I think I want to frame it, because otherwise, you know, if we ask Caroline another question, we're going to be here another 20 minutes.
You're right. We're going to be here another hour.
I'm not short in my responses. Sorry.
No, it's good, because look, I think it's easy to talk about the theory and what everybody should do. And personally, that's a trigger for me. I hate being shoulded by anybody. So helping our members see how the rubber meets the road in those 20-minute answers, I think is what makes a difference here. We started at a big topic. We started a really, really big topic where, like, you can see in your company, HR is trying to do this, right? Like, a lot of people are trying, don't leave, right? Let's think about the design of the people that we're hiring, the people that we're bringing in, the experience they get. How do we change up those experiences? And how do we be force multipliers? I know people can reach you on LinkedIn. Caroline and I live in the same town. Sometimes we see each other in real life, but she's been a tremendous resource for my entire career in enablement. So I recommend you guys reach out to Caroline. This has been an amazing experience. Great questions. If you have more, send them through, and we'll see if we can get them answered post. But this is also not the end of our webinar series for the year. We've got something coming up where we're going to be talking not just about sales kickoffs, because guess what? That's right around the corner, but thinking about it in the hybrid capacity that so many of us do. How do you do that? How do you make that experience work for both sides in a meaningful way, and rethink it and actually potentially make it better? So look out on LinkedIn for some of those kinds of things coming up from us in November and December. Thank you so much, Caroline and John.
Caroline, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great to be here. I really appreciate it.
Bye all.
Thanks, everyone.